the purpose of our visit here at the National Prosecuting Authority was to introduce her to her own organization, the National Prosecuting Authority. As you may well be aware, the Constitution states that the cabinet member responsible for the administration of justice, ourselves, are responsible, have final responsibility over the National Prosecuting Authority. So in that vein, we took a moment this morning after a brief meeting with the new incumbent, Advocate Batohi, to firstly introduce her to her new management team, which is the leadership both at head office and in the regions, followed by a introduction to the staff at head office, as well as through telecommunication, the rest of the staff throughout the country. And I must, speaking for myself, and in fact I believe on behalf of the ministry, indicate that we really are delighted today, and we consider it a celebratory moment in welcoming fresh blood into the organization. We all are aware that certainly from my entry into this portfolio almost 5 years ago, the organization has experienced many challenges, a lot of uncertainty throughout, a lot of negative publicity, and indications of divisions of political and other forms of extraneous interference in the workings of the organization, weakness at various levels of leadership, and of course with the many commissions of inquiry that are underway, and as has appeared at other platforms, including various litigation processes, it is apparent that there has been serious difficulties in the organization. So this gives me an opportunity, first of all, to express our profound gratitude for the leadership that the President, first and foremost, has provided in the manner in which he responded to the court injunction to ensure that the organization's leadership problems are resolved at the helm through the appointment of a new NDPP who is now with us today, and today it's her first day at work, hence this occasion. And of course it befalls on her to take it from there in terms of dealing with the many challenges that she inherits in the organization. There's a few areas that we're working on together already. We have had a meeting with the Minister of Police and the National Commissioner of Police yesterday on the sidelines to discuss certain aspects in terms of applicable legislation that will enable us to work towards, amongst other things, addressing issues of capacity in the NPA in the face of what is emerging from the various processes I've alluded to earlier that may result in quite a bit of work for the NPA that might require significant injection of additional capacity in the organization to be able to respond effectively to the challenges ahead and to discharge its responsibilities accordingly in dealing with some of those matters. I think the detail thereof will become clear and available in due course once all the processes have been concluded. The Cabinet Lekgotla that is currently underway has also taken note of some of these issues, and I believe we enjoy the support of the collective at that level in our effort to bring one of the most important pillars of our Constitution back on sound footing and to enable it to effectively discharge its constitutional mandate. This is largely not meant to me delivering a media briefing, a statement or speech, and therefore I will not take it further than this, but rather afford the opportunity to the new National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Shamila Batohi, to take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon to members of the press and good afternoon to the people of South Africa. I am honored to be welcomed here today as your new National Director of Public Prosecutions. I reiterate that my only obligation is to serve this country with gratitude and humility to the best of my ability. It's been a particularly dramatic and dynamic week for me. Only last week, Thursday, I was still at the ICC in The Hague in freezing conditions, and 1 week later, I'm here. I arrived on Friday, spent a few days with family, and arrived in Pretoria just 4 days ago. Today is my first day in office, but already I am greatly enthused by my interactions over the past days, which have been marked by cooperation and commitment. It is inspiring to see the diverse sections of government and civil society that have come together to offer their support to the NPA in this difficult road ahead, I should say. We know it is difficult, but we are determined. I returned to the NPA at a time of crisis, not only for the organization, but also for the rule of law in South Africa. Without it, the country is on a slippery slope, and the cancer of impunity festers and grows with devastating impact on the country. But despite these challenges, I am really confident that the NPA will become an organization that puts justice first, and one we can all be proud of, and that many countries in Africa and beyond can aspire to. I have just come out of a meeting with all NPA staff. I reiterated that we as prosecutors hold the future of our country in our hands. South Africa's constitutional democracy cannot survive disrespect for the rule of law. Justice must win, and not just in terms of empty rhetoric, but by our actions. This is how we in the NPA want to be judged in a few years' time, by our actions and not just our words. I am under no illusions about the challenges and the complexity of the task that lies before us. Our rainbow nation is reeling from allegations of corruption, violent crime, and impunity. Corruption is driven by greed and selfishness. In certain contexts, when public institutions are corrupted, it amounts to theft from ordinary South Africans just trying to make ends meet and live a better life in South Africa. We need to ensure that money goes where it was intended. I commit to leading an organization which has the courage and the ability to end this damaging state of affairs. Perpetrators of crime and corruption within the state and private sector, regardless of who you are, where you are, how rich you are, your days of acting with impunity are numbered. I reminded all prosecutors this morning that we are lawyers for the people and that, unfortunately, the people don't trust us anymore. This state of affairs cannot endure, and we have to turn that around. We are committed to turn that around. We have to get our house in order. We will act with courage, a deep commitment to our constitutional obligations, and an unwavering commitment to our independence, which I will fiercely defend. Beyond courage, we need an organization with the capacity to deliver. I have spoken to the Minister about this, and I will work tirelessly with my government counterparts, external partners, including civil society and the private sector, to ensure the NPA is an effective and efficient organization that can address the challenges of the 21st century. This will require hard work and innovation and perseverance. I know that everyone out there is hungry for justice. You have every right to be. Serious allegations have emerged, some old, some new, but all damaging if they are found to have any basis in fact at all. What is emerging is distressing in the extreme and will receive immediate attention from me and my team. I will, as soon as possible, engage with relevant stakeholders, including the team at the Zondo Commission and the head of the SIU, amongst others. As the Minister mentioned, we had already met with the Police Commissioner as well as the Minister of Police yesterday. However, you must bear in mind that for justice to win, we can't only focus as the NPA on the revelations of the Zondo Commission and other commissions. We need to ensure access and delivery of justice to the millions of victims of crime, including of sexual and gender-based violence. All South Africans have a constitutional right to feel safe and secure. Government entities need our support to make our country safe. It is also incumbent on every South African, on every one of you, to consider how can you contribute towards fighting crime more effectively. For example, are we providing a market for stolen goods? We need to consider how our own behaviors might be influencing crime. I share your sense of urgency and commit to moving quickly on a number of pressing matters in the coming months, weeks and months. But you must understand that my colleagues and I will need to prioritize, and also that fixing the rule of law is a long-term endeavor, and we need the support of you, the people of South Africa. There is a dark cloud hanging over the NPA. The NPA needs a change in leadership, one that prosecutors and all South Africans can be proud of. I also told NPA staff that they have my complete loyalty to those who are committed to upholding the values of the Constitution and to getting the work done. Importantly, however, members of the NPA who are unwilling to work as professionals with integrity do not have a future in the organization. Prosecutors are not for sale. That said, I have no doubt that the majority of prosecutors in the NPA are hard-working and dedicated and committed persons working in a criminal justice system under immense pressure for various reasons. I have no doubt that all of them will share in this vision. Before concluding, I personally thank those of you in the media, civil society, and the state who have courageously and tirelessly led efforts to expose the nature of corruption and force the government's hand. You have brought us back from the edge of a state of capture cliff. We will now take it from here as the NPA. You will appreciate that I have a full desk of urgent matters. I need to connect with prosecutors throughout the country to understand their needs and priorities, while at the same time delivering on priority issues that need action now. While I intend to build an open and constructive relationship with the media, I would like to limit my engagement with the media in the coming weeks. There is simply too much to do. I'll be announcing the NPA communication strategy in due course, which will include engagement with you, members of the media. I trust that you will understand and that you will give me the space to do what I have been appointed to do. I thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I would imagine you will have a few questions, although I think from the speech that the NDPP has made now, she's covered the high level, what her approach is going to be and how she's going to engage with it, because I know many of you, and those who are not here today, those of you who are here, please understand that I know we've been getting a lot of requests for one-on-ones. I think the NDP has addressed that and has given you, proper understanding of her approach from here. So, but I'm sure she will work very well with you moving forward. If there are questions, which I'm sure there are, high-level questions, please can you take them? As you ask your question, please, especially for the sake of the National Director, because she will need to know a whole lot of you. So just introduce yourself in the media house and then just ask the question.
Hi, I have two questions. Advocate Shamila spoke about the possibility of an investigations unit within the NPA, which I would imagine would be empowered much like the Scorpions were for prosecutor-driven investigations. Do you believe that, given everything that the history, what happened with the Scorpions, etc., there would be now a new enthusiasm within the kind of new law rhetoric that we've seen for a unit much like the Scorpions to do what you were talking about? Do you feel that you have political backing in that? And then, Minister, there have been a number of revelations about, for instance, from Correctional and Lawrence McQuarrie and Jackie DePinker allegedly getting money in order to quash the Masutha investigation. In your tenure, at your time as Minister, did you have any idea that such allegations or there was any suggestion of such corruption? And while I know it's not proven, are you at all concerned that there may have been some level of oversight deficit on your part in terms of identifying the lack of movement in the Masutha investigation? And would you as Minister support an investigations unit within the NPA, much like the former Scorpions unit? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much. I also have just to follow up at Masutha from my colleague's question about your role in the or your presiding over the NPA and instability that persists. We've heard from the Mokoro inquiry, we've heard of the state capital inquiry. How are you going to do things differently as the minister in charge to stop the political interference? These are your colleagues that are in cabinet, etc., and in the ruling party that have been accused of meddling in issues of criminal justice. How are you going to make things easier for the new National Director of Public Prosecutions? To the Advocate Batohi, two questions. The first of which is to follow up on Karen's question, is how are you going to do things differently in these 2 months that you've had? since your announcement of your appointment? What were you thinking about? What new ideas are you bringing to the table? And secondly, there's just been a massive issue aside from the political instability, etc. What we heard in the interviews from some of your colleagues is there's just a leadership problem, entirely across the organization, of which involves your deputies and then other very senior members of the NPA. Are you going to be having any discussions with the president, or are you sort of going to just limp along and let the status quo remain, considering that the problems in the NPA have been, at various leadership levels?
Okay, that's the only two. Something.
Something I said from the NPA. My question is directed to Advocate Shamila Batohi and Minister Masutha. To the advocates, have you had any engagements since your appointment with your two deputies that are currently in the commission due to allegations of their conduct and fitness to hold office that is below employment and Advocate Shamila Batohi? Have you had any engagements with them? What have the nature of those engagements been? If they've been any engagements, or have you engaged the President on this particular matter in reference to my colleague Mr. Hunter's question? And lastly, to the revelations that are coming out of the Zondo Commission, particularly that have to do with Musasa, what action will you be taking in the immediate to investigate the revelations, the startling revelations that are being revealed or allegedly revealed by Angela Agrizi, where millions of rands is being counted and exchanged and given to people? What investigation will you be doing on that part? And to Minister Masutha, Musasa is currently doing business of about 1.5 billion rand with your Department of Correctional Services. What investigations are you doing in order to stop those contracts that Musasa has and has allegedly gotten them fraudulently by bribing people? What actions are you taking, or is it business as usual as we've seen in the past 9 years? Thank you.
That's it.
Good afternoon. Patricia Masutha from the SABC. To Advocate Batohi, what I want to know is, do you have perhaps a decisive strategy already in place in terms of how you're going to deal with the political pressure within the NPA that we have often seen actually being at the center of some of the controversies and some of the controversial elements that have come up? Is there a strategy in place on how we're going to, number one, root out that if there is, and how you will deal with it if that time arrives, perhaps if you are politically pressured to take certain decisions or not to take certain decisions, as we always say that everyone is equal under the law regardless of their position.
Okay, that's all the questions. Thank you. Minister and NPA, I think you will have an arrangement how you deal with
Should I go
it.
first? Would you like to,
It's
Minister?
nice
Maybe you
everybody
should
has
go.
a set of their own.
You want me to go first?
Okay. Well, thank you, Minister. Okay, with regard to the first question, look, we're all aware of, as I said, the devastating allegations that are emerging from the Commission, the Zondo Commission in particular. The NPA Act does provide for creating a capacity to deal with certain specified crimes. What I can say at this point is that the allegations are unprecedented in terms of the scope, nature, complexity of corruption. And it requires a highly specialized, well-funded entity to be able to deal with this. The NPA is under a lot of pressure as it is, and so it requires a certain very specific response to these issues. So all I can say at this point is that the ministers and I have had some preliminary discussions, and we are of the view that in order to properly address these issues, there needs to be a proper multidisciplinary response to this, and we are certainly at this point looking at all possibilities. I think this also takes care of one of the other questions that I was asked about: what action will be taken immediately to investigate all the allegations that have been coming up in the Zondo Commission. The question about, for the past 2 months, what have I been thinking about new ideas, etc. Sure, I have been very busy at the ICC, you can rest assured, and I understand that I haven't been able to properly consider these matters. I've been following very briefly what's been going on in South Africa. And the one thing I've mentioned now is I've discussed with the ministers, we are thinking about a very specialized capacity to address this immediate problem that's facing the country. But beyond that, I would be arrogant to say that I have any specific strategies, etc., because I need to listen to the team, I need to listen to the directors, and we need to together. I know they have been working on a strategy already, and I will certainly review that. And in due course, I would be able to speak to you again and give you more details about how we intend to deal with some of the aspects that require attention within the institution. You mentioned a leadership problem. I think we can all accept that the crisis in the NPA has been as a result of problems at the leadership level. And what I can say at this point is that things do need to change. We need a fresh start in the NPA. I haven't spoken to persons in leadership positions, and I will certainly talk to them. We have certainly people that are hardworking in leadership positions, and I'm not going to go into details about what caused these issues, but I think the NPA requires a change in leadership and a fresh approach to various things. So I will be having discussions with various people to look at how we can ensure that the interests of the NPA and the country are best addressed, and we can take the NPA forward. Engagement with the two deputies, I've had no engagement with them. I think there was... Yes, thank you. So the strategy to deal with political pressure. One is, I feel fairly confident that there will be no political pressure put on me with regard to... Well, let me rephrase that. Let me put it this way. I said in my interview that if I am offered this position, I will have a conversation with the President. We all know that the Constitution guarantees independence and requires that the NPA act without fear, favor, or prejudice. But we know what has been happening recently. It's been pretty difficult. When I was finally, it was decided that I would be the President's preferred candidate as far as this post is concerned, I did have a conversation with the President, and I said to him that, I know it's guaranteed in the Constitution, but I want you sitting here to give me that assurance. And unhesitatingly, the President said there will be no interference, political interference into the work of the NPA. So I feel fairly confident that that will not happen, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. And if it does, for any reason, then I will fiercely defend it. It's a constitutional issue, and I will take it to the Constitutional Court if need be. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for all the questions. I wished they were substituted by the more simpler ones. Unfortunately, This job has been a bit of a roller coaster from day one. And yes, have we been ball watching? I wish we were at all times at a vantage position to see the ball in the first place. I said to the prosecutors earlier on that I hope my limited vision did not limit me in terms of being able to see certain things that had sight of, maybe one would have dealt with things differently. But I want to indicate that at most management meetings that I've held with all the departments and entities under this portfolio, I've used a cliche that says, if you do the right thing, know that you have my full backing. And if you have to fall, rest assured I'd happily fall with you. But if you choose to do the wrong thing, and I use the words black men, black women, white men, white women, you are on your own. It's become a signature phrase. I hope I will not be accused of plagiarism because I haven't quoted the source whenever I used this. To make the point that I left it to each individual at all levels of any of the entities I have been responsible for to take personal responsibility for their actions or inactions. But certainly where information has come to the fore that raised concerns, we have tried to intervene. And I don't want to go into much of the specific instances where, because I don't necessarily want to use this platform to put any individual on the spot at this stage. But what I can indicate is that if we took Bosasa as a starting point, one of the questions I repeatedly asked the management of correctional services was, how did we end up being in a situation where we have had to use violence year in, year out to fund this outsourced service, because clearly it seemed to me that funds year in, year out had to be diverted in order to support this contractual arrangement. But I've also asked, how did we end up in a situation where so many years down the line we have not been able to develop our own in-house capacity to provide catering for our inmates in the big centers where Bosasa has been providing the service, and end up in this often referred to evergreen contractual arrangement. And the kind of explanations have been given was that the catering equipment at those big centers became obsolete, and it became unaffordable for the department to replace them. And as one of the factors that led to outsourcing, and I was listening to some of the testimony at the Zondo Commission, I was wondering, was this response some narrative that was artificially created to justify something that was not genuine? I suppose the truth will finally prevail. So I have been myself deeply concerned since I took office about this perpetual outsourcing of what I have always had doubt was absolutely unavoidable. The National Commissioner has advised me that in the light of these revelations, they are working on reviewing the whole arrangement, and I look forward to a report soon from him as to the prospects of us extricating ourselves out of this and restoring our own insourcing of this service. And I know that even though I'm awaiting a fuller report, that he is interacting with a number of relevant state institutions in this regard. So I was not necessarily assuming that this was a manipulated arrangement, as appears to have been from, if one judges from some of the revelations that are being made. And this leads me to the second strain of this matter, or leg of it, and that is the SIU report that has also since been featuring at the Zondo Commission, relating to a finding regarding irregularity of that of some component of that arrangement, where our understanding is that the SIU had directed to previous management of corrections that the contractual arrangement be reviewed and certain legal action taken because of the irregular award, if I understood correctly, of the tender at the time, and where apparently such action was not taken. Obviously, that's a matter that is also being looked at. And talking again of SIU investigations, you know that at some point last year, the SIU revealed a quite significant number of investigations that it concluded and submitted reports in terms of its own legislation to the NPA for prosecutorial decision, which of course, as I understand it, first gets referred to the police, or specifically DPCI, and based on the investigation, then prosecutorial decisions are taken. When that report came through, we had a meeting with the head of the SIU and of the acting NDPP, and agreed that between them and the head of the DPCI, there would be an in-depth investigation as to what actually happened to all those matters after they were referred to the NPA by the SIU. And it includes the Bosasa contract issue and the SI report in that regard, as I mentioned earlier. At the time when I asked the acting NDPP as to why in that specific case no criminal action had been forthcoming, the response I got was that the NPA's, the response to the NPA from the DPCI was that a forensic report that required some funding needed to be commissioned by the investigative authority, and that had stalled proceeding with the matter between the DPCI and the NPA. I must confess that I'm not particularly technically sufficiently equipped in this regard to have been able to question the veracity or the credibility of this. Safe to say that I felt that the matter did warrant to be pursued, and indeed we are awaiting a more comprehensive report following the interaction between the three law enforcement agencies, SIU, DPCI, and the NPA, on all these matters that had been referred. So that, as you know, in terms of the NPA, I can request written reports on certain matters, and in fact, from time to time, I do request those reports to appraise me of what has actually happened in a specific matter. So we're awaiting that, and that would give us a sense. The NDPP alludes to the fact that we are in discussion around issues of capacity, and I know a question was asked about reintroducing a Scorpion-type investigative entity within the NPA. Those are details which I think once all the work around developing dedicated capacity to respond fully and effectively to the revelations that are coming out of the various commissions, will come through. So perhaps the other aspect relating to the Bosasa matter, if you like, that I could allude to is the security arrangements at the State Capture Commission premises, where a Bosasa-linked company is said to have provided service. This has been the matter where I have had ongoing discussions with the Deputy Chief Justice, with the DG of Justice as accounting officer. As you know, all commissions of inquiry are supported by the Department of Justice, and therefore the DG of Justice is the accounting officer. In so far as administrative support is concerned. And we have finally reached a point where the department has, as I understand it, commissioned a forensic investigation to establish as to whether indeed a tender was irregularly awarded for the provision of that service, and who was responsible for such irregular award between the department and the Secretariat of the Commission. And in due course, I guess between ourselves, the accounting authority at the Department of Justice, and the chair of the Commission, we should be able to provide more reliable information as to what transpired and as to, therefore, what appropriate course of action needs to be taken. But I was also advised by the department that the forensic investigation that they're conducting will go into the entire history of procurement of Bosasa-linked procurement of security services to the Department of Justice, so that we can establish whether at any point dating back to when the relationship commenced, any irregularity had occurred, and to establish who was responsible for that. So that work is underway. In the meantime, obviously, let me also indicate that my understanding, save for the services that are the subject of the current situation with the security features at the state capture inquiry, the department advises me that they are no longer having ongoing contractual relationship with the affected company, as that has since terminated towards the end of last year, I think around September or so. So what is outstanding there is just that additional element, which would have been sought to be procured by way of extending what was initially a contractual arrangement that pre-existed between the department and that company, to include the installation of security features at the Commission venue. So, of course, once all the information is clarified and the evidence, the relevant law enforcement agencies will be able to make a fresh look at things and see who should do what by when, in order to pursue whatever matters that require action. Sorry for that long, protracted explanation. I just thought, in the interest of transparency, let me share the much that has been brought to my attention. The allegations of bribes, whether I was aware of them, that are coming through at the inquiry through into the fitness to hold office of the two deputies. That is completely new information to me. I at no stage had reason to suspect and never had any inkling of any such manipulations that are coming through. Was I too hands off? I know whenever, we as politicians have interacted with this institution, the first suspicion was, is it with the intention to interfere politically? I've generally adopted an attitude of allowing the institution the space to do its work, and never really tried to act as a hawk, always hovering over it, unless issues arose. And whenever challenges arose, I took time to come to this headquarters to engage with management on those issues, and I've done so on a number of occasions. But I've also invited members of the institution, as I did members of all other entities I'm responsible for, to come forward. I've always adopted an open door policy, and I've always used the expression that my chief of staff is not a door to my office. He tries and helps in organizing my schedule, but anybody who wishes, and I continue to keep that door open. I have always kept it open. So I would have expected that people who wished to raise serious issues of concern, such as are emerging, to have come on the sidelines even to share some of this information, so that we could have acted on some of it. But that's as far as I'll take it. I don't know if there are any specific questions that I may have missed or forgotten that you may want to follow up on. Thanks.
No, it's one, because we're really.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Thank you for this
One
explanation. Advocate, I just want to confirm one thing. You say that you're reviewing your contracts with Masutha. Is that after president's going to be reviewing your contracts with Masutha? Secondly, just trying to find out, are you basically issuing, you're going to pay a forensic investigative company to investigate issues that, say, Capture Commission is investigating? What is the need for that? Number one, and number two is, why isn't the purchase reported? Why do you need to then outsource this to forensic? Is this not to delay the investigations or really taking place in relation to the SASA and the tender?
All right. The next one.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you again for that detailed information. I think at least there's some intent of transparency, which I think we all appreciate. But my first question is, you said that when you raised questions about why there had been no movement on the SARS investigation, the acting NDPP told you it was because of these forensic issues, capability issues with the Hawks. Am I correct in assuming that was Advocate Jiva, number one? Did you accept that explanation, and did you try to do anything to push them to actually work on this? Because the report had been provided in 2010, and given that you had these misgivings about the fact that these allegations have been raised in the SIU report, did you yourself at any point say in your position that you did not feel it was appropriate that the department continue to have a relationship to the extent of the 1.5 billion rand in check as described by Sam Kelly? And then lastly, and I hate to ask you, but given
Sorry, I
kind
missed
of
the last
wealth
one.
of revelations that we've
Sorry, I
seen,
missed the last one you've just said.
What steps you took about actually saying, given the kind of allegations that had surfaced in the SIU, would it be appropriate for the department to continue having, this relationship with the SASA with 1.5 billion rand in tenders? And then, we've seen a number of people in your party, a number of individuals in government alleged on the version of the state capture inquiry witnesses to have received bribes, to receive chickens, bribe packs, security. We're not going to, what guarantees can you give us that no such revelations are going to be made about yourself, given the pivotal role that you play within the department? Thank you.
Before you speak something, I'm actually quite tempted to ask that, all these other questions happen, on a one-on-one basis. Because
I think these are issues that the nation
Yeah, no, wait,
needs
Karen,
answers
let me
about.
finish.
One-on-one, it's a live TV.
because what my
The need for the
concern
altercation.
is that now the briefing is going at a different direction. And no, but the issue is the national director has another meeting at 2 o'clock. So can we just be mindful of that as well? So in
Yeah.
really managing that doesn't become a long, protracted.
In fact, I'm worried myself that, as you correctly say, we might be detracting from matters that really falls elsewhere that deserve another occasion. Not that I have any difficulty in responding to any of them. I'm sure if there were any incidents of any improper relationship between me and Botasa, by now those would have come to the fore. But of course, the process is still ongoing. So if there's anything that would still be revealed about anybody else, including myself, I'm sure that should happen. But if you're asking me the direct question, have I received any form of bribe in that regard, the answer is no. If that is the direct question you would want me to respond to. The continued contractual arrangement, I thought I had explained that yes, the National Commissioner is looking at this. They are rendering a service to the biggest of our centers, which obviously involve the lives of a huge number of our inmates. So whatever purported termination of contractual relationship that could be envisaged should happen responsibly, obviously, in the sense that the well-being of inmates should never be compromised in the process. For me, that's the bottom line. But of course, we cannot perpetuate impropriety wherever and whenever we uncover it. That is the general rule. So I think that hopefully just clarifies that specific issue. As to revelations that affect high-profile people, etc., the processes are ongoing. The Constitution is clear on the rule of law, and of course that has to apply at all times in dealing with matters. So due process will guide appropriate intervention as and when it becomes due. So I don't think there's a difficulty there. Duplicating processes, a government department, and in particular an accounting officer, has an obligation in law to ensure that they protect the interests of the state. So that responsibility derives from their legal obligations. There is nothing that stops any corrective measures, even as various commissions of inquiry are ensuing, whether of a criminal or civil or even disciplinary action internally within state institutions to take their course. As I understand it, of course you cannot impede the work of a commission of inquiry. It would be improper. So I think there is a lot of room for various processes to happen in tandem and parallel to each other. And that may turn out to be more complementary than anything. I would imagine the NPA itself, once it's in a position to initiate prosecution, it wouldn't necessarily have to wait for a matter to be concluded at any of the commissions, because some of the action may need speed, may require urgent intervention. I don't know if I left any of your other queries, but insofar as those matters are concerned, that would be my response. Thank you.
Okay. In the interest of time, this is how we're moving forward now, because we have to come to a close of this briefing. Clearly, there's a lot of interest coming out of Busasa issues coming from the state capture inquiry, and I think it's very clear that the minister and everybody is willing and prepared to be transparent about it. But I think for the purposes of today's briefing, it really is not fair to the program of the day, because remember what we started with was we are coming here to introduce the national director, and of course the national director has a full program that is scheduled for the day, meetings with the senior management that are now being held back because of a media briefing that is tended to take a different direction. So I really want to propose that maybe if there are any further questions around the state capture inquiry, the Busasa issues specifically, clearly the minister is very happy to take those. The minister's spokesperson and person working in his office dealing with media, Max, is sitting here, and then maybe you can just make requests for those interviews. But as far as this briefing is concerned, and it's relating to the introduction of the NDPP, if your question relates to that, Samkelo will happily take it, but really can we just maybe, for the purposes of moving forward, was it about Busasa again? And that is the last one. Patricia, yours is the last one after. Or are you?
Something else.
It's Busasa.
No.
For the minister or the national director?
For the
For the national director. And then that will be it, my dear colleagues, and we will adjourn.
Apologies for stealing your shine, but those questions are very important.
It's fine.
My question to you, what is your most important case at this point in time? Out of all of the regulations coming out of various commissions in the country, which case do you think is most important to try and sway South Africans that indeed there is a new dawn at the NPA, where those who have been found with their hands in the cookie jar will be held accountable? which is the most important case which you will pursue to try and sway South African views on the NPA? Then lastly, on the case of Mr. Zuma, which was withdrawn to Police Jonas to testifying for being cross-examined later on in the State Commission of Inquiry. What was the basis of that withdrawal from the NPA with regards to prosecuting Mr. Duguzane?
Last one, Patricia.
Advocate Batohi, Patricia Yangi from the SABC. Just in short, what's your take on South Africa planning to leave the ICC? Since you come from there.
I hope it never happens. Short answer. But the questions with regard to which case I think is the most important. I think that's, for me, I have not been properly briefed yet. It's my first day in office, but there have been revelations with regard to several cases in the media. All of those seem very important. And what I can say is that we will now look at doing and looking into various allegations and looking at, as I said, creating this entity. And I'm kind of waffling it. So let me just be clear that there are several cases that appear to be very important. Let me put it that way, that the NPA and in law enforcement agencies, police have got to look at when this specialized capacity is put together. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I'll say that there are several that we will need to look into. I mentioned in my address initially that it could relate to people that are in high positions, both in the public and in corporate sector. So, the rule of law, everyone is equal. And so where the evidence takes us, we will prosecute. The withdrawal of the case against Mr. Zuma, I have no idea about the reasons for that. I will no doubt be briefed about it. But what I would say is that I intend to get a team together to do an audit of a number of cases, and depends on what emerges from that process. I will decide on the next steps with regard to those issues. And the ICC. Well, I'm going to be very quick, but I hope it never happens. The ICC is the one institution, world body, that the world has to deal with atrocities, holding people accountable for atrocities across the world. We're talking about war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, and now aggression. And South Africa was one of those countries that strongly supported the creation of the ICC. And South Africa is one of those countries that has a really, really good human rights track record and is often looked towards by other countries in terms of the way forward. So the ICC is not a perfect system. Certainly the Rome Statute creates a system of international criminal law that needs to be strengthened. And so I think states parties need to remain within the system and strengthen it so that we can hold people accountable. And again, the ICC, irrespective of whether you're a head of state, rule of law applies to everyone. And so I think it's a crucial institution in terms of the International Criminal Justice Project. And I hope that South Africa remains there and remains, in fact, one of those that guides various other countries in terms of the way forward in ensuring that this project is strengthened and not weakened.
Thank you, and on that high note, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend, everybody.
On my way, I'm not saying anything.
One-on-ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not sure what they're doing. Thank you very much.